Hello everybody and welcome to the 7th daily landscape photography critique sponsored by K's Filters. We've made it through our first week, which is great. Hopefully I can keep this going and hopefully you are finding this useful. But today we will be discussing 3 images submitted by Jonas Mehlich. So let's get started. Jonas has sent us 3 images from what I think are very different locations around the world. Certainly, I think this is Madeira and then the Lofoten Islands. I'm not so sure on the third. But we'll go through these one by one, starting with these rather iconic trees. I can't remember the name of this forest, but pretty enigmatic, gestural, human-like trees here on Madeira. And these are photographed quite heavily and in these conditions, but you can understand why, because there is this amazing sense of depth coming from the fog, and that puts a real focus on the form of these trees, and they are very human-like. Joe Cornish said to me that was the great interest of trees for him, was the gestural forms they take on and how they can read as motion and movement, and how in particular some of them look human-like, and that's certainly the case with this tree. And it won't surprise you to know that if you Google the Madeira forest, you will end up with quite a few photos of this tree. And that's maybe a point of critique that's worth mentioning, because I think the standard of photography we're seeing here is very good. And personally, by the time I got to this level in my photography, I'd started to try to avoid some of these spots, at least where it was practicable, because I found it hard to do anything different in some of these places. And I think it's hard to see how you could really improve on a scene like this compositionally, because of course you want this simplicity and you want this fog and you want these silhouettes. I think the edit's been very well handled. We can have a quick look at the raw file here, and you see that it's much colder. But if we set the white balance to 5,500 Kelvin, it gets us partway there, and the green that's introduced looks to be a white balance error in the auto white balance of the camera, because this is a Canon file, so I know that the tint should be somewhere around here. So you can see that Jonas has chosen a warmer white balance, but I think that's a perfectly fine choice. I'd personally not do anything more really than what you see here. I'm not sure that I'd even add contrast. But the edit is certainly perfectly good, and yeah, it's a lovely scene with this ent-like tree, but it's a shame that I'd seen the tree before, to be honest, because the first thing that I saw when I saw this was my memory, if you like, of all of the other images that I'd seen of this tree, and I have seen quite a few. And the same, unfortunately, goes for this beach in Lofoten. Now, I think the difference here is that Jonas has brought something of himself to this image, because the foreground is obviously something that he has constructed very carefully and very successfully. We have these strong leading lines feeding into the mountain. Incidentally, I've said this before on my channel, but leading lines to me have to have this amount of strength, really, to have that powerful effect of drawing you into the scene. And so that they're very effective when they are this strong, but generally you don't want to go around imagining leading lines. They often aren't there even when you want them to be. But this has been very well handled, because the raw file shows a lot of contrast as well. So there's obviously an incredibly bright cloud there and some quite dark shadows on the mountain. But the edit's been very well done to bring back some of those highlights, keep some warmth in the image, keep it looking fairly optimistic. And I don't really have too many pointers here, because I just think it's been very well executed. The one thing I would say is that when you are photographing these well-known scenes, or relatively well-known scenes, the more you can do to be individual, to be interesting, to try different things, the better, in my opinion. And maybe slightly more extraordinary lighting conditions would be something I would personally aim for. And that's something that I will do in my mountain work, with established grand vistas from some of the mountains that I shoot on in Scotland. I tend to aim for the more spectacular conditions for those scenes, simply because it's just one mechanism for creating an image that is a bit more unusual to the viewer, should they already be familiar with some of these scenes. But outright, this is just a lovely image. And then finally, the third image, which to my mind is the strongest of the three and the most interesting. It shows Jonas's ability really well in a whole host of areas. But what I think I'm impressed with the most is just the bravery of tackling this subject. It's crazy, it's unruly, it's awkward, it's not obvious, even ugly, some people might say, you know, a sort of dead or dying bush. But it has been turned into the most fascinating subject for this foreground. And alongside that, you have a really excellent handling of all of the colors and tones within the scene, and some really nice mirroring with the colors in the rock and the colors in the sky. So there's a coherence here when often these skies, these flaming altocumulus skies, actually create really problematic color contrasts with the landscape. Here, it just works beautifully. Everything ties together very easily. And I might be a bit particular and say, well, it's a pity about the house here, the path, and what I assume is a sort of visitor sign at what might be a popular area. I don't know. But actually, I think it was probably right, given these conditions and the subject that Jonas has found, to just accept those aspects of the scene, because the result is absolutely stunning. I really love this image. And again, from an editing standpoint and compositional standpoint, there really is nothing that I would do differently. I even think it's right to have this almost 50-50 split. To me, that actually feels quite natural in this case. If you did want to go for 4:5 crop, then, you know, I think that works well too. But having the height in the frame is actually quite nice. So I suppose not too much room for critique with this particular image, just a lovely image to finish on. So thank you very much, Jonas, for sending your images in, and I will see you all in the next one.